Imagine laughing at a $50 million deal that would eventually be worth $250 billion. That's not just a mistake, it's a death sentence. The year is 2000. We are in a high-rise boardroom in Dallas, Texas. The air is thick with the smell of expensive cologne and the crushing weight of unearned confidence. On one side of the table sits John Antioco, the CEO of Blockbuster. He is the king of home entertainment. He oversees 9,000 stores, $5 billion in revenue, and a brand name that is synonymous with Friday night. On the other side sit two guys who look like they've been living on cold pizza and server room exhaust, Hastings and Marc Randolph. They have a struggling startup called Netflix. They are burning cash, their DVD by mail model is bleeding, and they are desperate. They make an offer, $50 million. They'll run the online side of the business, and Blockbuster can own the future. John Antioco laughs, not a polite chuckle, but a deep, dismissive roar. To him, Netflix is a joke, a niche service for people too lazy to drive to a store. He shows them the door. What Antioco didn't realize was that he wasn't looking at a competitor. He was looking at his own autopsy. He was suffering from the momentum delusion. Blockbuster was a freight train moving at 100 miles per hour, but the engine was already dead. The wheels were just still spinning. This is the story of how a titan of industry became a ghost. This is Netflix versus Blockbuster, the $50 million mistake. Phase 1, the late fee addiction. To understand why Blockbuster died, you have to understand how they actually made money. You think Blockbuster was in the movie business. Halak, you're wrong. They were in the punishment business. In the late 90s, Blockbuster was generating roughly $800 million a year from late fees alone. That was 16% of their total revenue. Let that sink in. Their entire profit margin depended on their customers being unhappy. Every time you forgot to return Titanic on a Tuesday, you were paying for John Antioco's private jet. In business psychology, we call this the late fee narcotic. Blockbuster was addicted to it. They couldn't imagine a world without it because it was the only thing keeping the stock price up. But here's the problem. When your business model relies on your customers hating you, your trust reservoir is bone dry. By 2000, Blockbuster was a ghost brand. On the outside, it looked healthy. 9,000 blue and yellow neon signs were glowing across the globe. But internally, the soul was gone. They weren't innovating. They were mining the brand equity. They were squeezing every last cent out of a dying habit, oblivious to the fact that their customers were looking for any reason at all, to never step foot in a store again. Netflix wasn't just selling DVDs by mail. They were selling the absence of anxiety, no late fees, no driving, no judgment. While Blockbuster was sharpening its claws to scratch another $5 out of your pocket, Netflix was building a relationship. Phase 2, the complexity trap. While Hastings was back in California building invisible infrastructure, Blockbuster was drowning in the complexity trap. Think about what it takes to run 9,000 physical stores. You aren't just managing movies. You're managing real estate. You're managing light bulbs, carpet cleaning, air conditioning units, and thousands of teenage employees who don't want to be there. Every morning, Blockbuster woke up with a massive bill just to keep the lights on. They had physical friction. If they wanted to expand, they had to sign a lease, hire a crew, and stock shelves. Netflix? Netflix had code. Netflix realized that the movie wasn't the plastic disc. The movie was the data. While Blockbuster was obsessed with shelf space, Netflix was obsessed with algorithm space. They knew that if they could predict what you wanted to watch, they didn't need a store on every corner. They just needed a warehouse and a post office. The sheer weight of Blockbuster's empire became its anchor. They couldn't pivot because they were literally made of bricks and mortar. You can't turn a mountain range around. By the time the internet became fast enough to move video, Blockbuster was still arguing about who was going to mop the floors in the Des Moines location. Phase 3, the boardroom civil war. Now here is the part of the story that most people get wrong. Blockbuster didn't die because they were stupid. They died because they were divided. By 2004, John Antioco actually woke up. He saw the Netflix numbers. He realized the late fee narcotic was killing the brand. He decided to do something radical. He launched Blockbuster Total Access. It was a brilliant move. You could rent online and then exchange the DVD in a physical store for a new one instantly. It was the hybrid model that should have crushed Netflix, and it worked. Blockbuster started stealing customers back. Netflix was terrified. Yet Reed Hastings later admitted that if Blockbuster had kept going, Netflix might have gone under. But then, enter the shark. Carl Icahn, the billionaire activist investor, bought a massive stake in Blockbuster. He didn't care about the long-term digital future. He cared about his quarterly dividends. He saw Antioco spending hundreds of millions of dollars to kill late fees and build a digital platform, and he saw it as a waste of his money. Icahn wanted short-term optimization. He wanted the late fees back. He wanted the margins up. A civil war erupted in the boardroom. It was a battle between a CEO who saw the iceberg and an investor who wanted to sell the wood from the lifeboats. Icahn won. Antioco was pushed out over a bonus dispute. The digital strategy was gutted. The late fees were reinstated, as the total access program was throttled. In their final hour, Blockbuster chose to protect their past rather than buy their future. They chose to optimize their way into a grave. Phase 4, the tipping point, 2007. 2007 was the year the world changed forever. It was the year of the iPhone. It was the year of the tipping point. At Blockbuster HQ, the executives were still talking about merchandise mix and how to sell more popcorn at the counter. They were doubling down on the physical experience. They thought they had time, but Netflix was done playing with mail. In 2007, they launched Watch Now, streaming. This is the classic innovator's dilemma. For Blockbuster to compete with streaming, they would have to destroy their own business. Why would they tell people to stay home and stream when they had 9,000 leases to pay? They couldn't cannibalize themselves, so they let Netflix do it for them. Netflix was no longer a DVD company. They were a tech company. Blockbuster was still a retail company. The gap between them wasn't just technological, it was philosophical. Netflix saw a world of abundance, where every movie was available at the click of a button. Blockbuster saw a world of scarcity, where you had to hope the person before you returned the new release on time. The moment Netflix hit the play button, the blue and yellow sign became a tombstone. The last store. The end wasn't a bang, it was a slow, agonizing whimper. In September 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. They had $1 billion in debt and a business model that belonged in a museum. By the time the headline hit the news, the failure had already happened 5 years prior in a boardroom where short-term gains were traded for long-term survival. Today, there is only one Blockbuster left. It's in Bend, Oregon. It's a tourist attraction. People go there to feel nostalgic, to smell the dusty plastic cases, and to remember a time before the algorithm. It's a monument to the momentum delusion. It's a reminder that being the biggest doesn't mean you're the strongest. It just means you have the furthest to fall. The lesson here is cold and hard. In the world of business, your biggest success is often your greatest vulnerability. Blockbuster was so good at the 20th century that they forgot to show up for the 21st. They laughed at a $50 million offer because they couldn't see past their own shadow. Now that shadow is all that's left. By the time you see the bankruptcy headline, the failure happened years ago. The question is, which ghost brands are you walking past today that are already dead but just haven't stopped moving yet? The $50 million laughter in that Dallas boardroom didn't just echo, it crystallized. It became the sound of an entire era of retail philosophy shattering. John Antioco wasn't just a CEO, he was a custodian of a dying religion. He believed in the physical moat. He thought that if you own the real estate, you own the customer. He didn't realize that in the digital age, a moat isn't a defense. It's a trench you've dug for your own funeral. By 2008, the internal rot was visible to everyone except the people in the C-suite. The boardroom civil war had left the company paralyzed. Carl Icahn's victory was a Pyrrhic one. By forcing Blockbuster to return to the late fee narcotic to boost short-term dividends, he effectively cut the brake lines while the car was headed for a cliff. He treated a technology shift like a retail slump. He thought he could optimize a horse and buggy to outrun a Ferrari. The tragedy of Blockbuster isn't that they didn't see Netflix coming, it's that they saw them, recognized the threat, built the weapon to stop them, and then let their own ego pull the trigger on themselves. They chose the comfort of a dying billion-dollar certainty over the risk of a trillion-dollar future. Today, Netflix spends $17 billion a year on content alone. That original $50 million asking price? That's less than the budget of a single mid-season episode of The Crown. It's a rounding error on their balance sheet. The Blue and Yellow Ghost in Bend, Oregon isn't just a store anymore. It's a warning. It tells us that in the digital economy, too big to fail is just another way of saying too slow to live. The failure didn't happen when the stores closed. It happened the second they stopped valuing the customer's time more than the customer's penalty fees. The corporate world is littered with the corpses of titans who thought they were the protagonists of the story. But in the market, there are no protagonists, only survivors. And the survivors are never the ones who laugh at the future. They're the ones who are terrified of it.